Is over.
I have an election attempt to see results party after this, but you know, that's probably not going to happen tonight.
I wish it was that easy, but until January 21st, we are not out of the woods yet.
Yeah, I don't think we are then either. I plan on learning Italian in case I need to get an Italian passport.
Yeah, the polls here in the gayest place on planet Earth have just closed. Any projections? Who's going to win?
No,
Pick a name.
I have no idea.
I'm sad to say Trump.
You think Trump? What do you think?
I'm going to say Biden because I want it to be true.
I'm going to say Biden in a landslide. Ooh.
So mote it be. Fucking.
Yeah.
Biden on a landslide.
Miami's going for Trump.
10.
Well, a big portion at least.
Yeah.
5, 4,
Yeah.
3, 2.
LGBTQ America.
It's November 3rd.
One day is here. Watch this.
Good morning. Today is the first day of the rest of America's life. One day. One day that will, one way or another, change how this country feels about itself. One last push to get the train back on its tracks. One day that cannot wipe out the last 9 months or the last 4 years, but can clear a path for 1,000 better days ahead. One day, America on a tightrope. One day when the entire world is watching, like a parent in the stands, peeking through their fingers. Come on, America, come on. One day that will now play itself out right in front of our eyes, hour by hour, vote by vote, with history on its shoulders. One day that will change our lives forever. It is November 3rd, 2020, America. We have one day.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Good evening, America. It is 7 p.m. Tuesday, November 3rd, and this is Queer News Tonight, the world's first live LGBTQ daily evening news. It's time to queer up the news. Tonight, the election of a lifetime comes to an end. Trump or Biden? Who's going to win?
It's Tuesday, and we continue with Q's Q&A on LGBTQ health with renowned Dr. Howard Grossman. We discuss your health questions and who's going to replace Fauci. Wait, what?
The election is over. Now the drama starts. LGBTQ America is stressed, so we help you take a break by looking at a tiny chipmunk restaurant.
So good evening, America. It is 7 p.m. Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020. This is the day. It is time to queer up the news. We are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. So many of your stories we're going to tell this evening on Queer News Tonight. The world's first live daily queer evening news show. Out of the closet and into the headlines on Q News Tonight. Well, thank you for joining Queer News Tonight. We are live and unedited. This is a live LGBTQ evening news show, so anything can happen and you'll see it all. This evening, we bring you the news of and a perspective from the LGBTQ community. I'm your anchor, Al Ferguson. Welcome guest anchor, David Hopkins. He is the creative inspiration at It's Happening Out, well known here in LGBTQ South Florida as an officer for the Lambda Men's Brotherhood charity. He will direct the Leather Mask Ball 15 at the Eagle Wilton Manors on November 27th. Welcome, David.
Thank you. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's for charity, so stop by.
A lot of fun. Next up is Gordon Woodworth III. They are a Gen Zer and works for the LGBTQ charity Broward House and identifies as genderqueer and non-binary. They are also pagan. Welcome, Gordon.
Thanks, Al.
Well, tonight we begin with queer headlines. The LGBTQ community in America is diverse, while the LGBTQ community around the world is vast. We're going to bring you the bullet points of queer news for today, Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020. We begin by queering up Vote 2020. Trump pride happens again. This time, Tiffany Trump has been heckled. Watch this.
So committed to really helping ending the criminalization of homosexuality lot.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about the ending of criminalization of homosexuality abroad, let's talk about the fact that he has for years.
Listen to that chant carefully. President Donald Trump's daughter, Tiffany Trump, found herself heckled by queer activists last night when she spoke at a Trump Pride rally in Pittsburgh. Former diplomat Richard Grenell, who spearheads Trump's LGBT outreach, has been hosting Trump Pride rallies to whip up gay support in several states. Tiffany Trump has spoken at some of these events, including one on Saturday in Minneapolis. That evening's event also featured Kimberly Guilfoyle. On Sunday, the Trump Pride circus rolled into Pittsburgh. However, whilst on stage, a small group of queer activists who had infiltrated the event started heckling Trump. The incident was then captured and posted on Twitter.
Yeah, two quick observations. One, you notice there were very few gay people in that crowd, except for the one screaming. Two, I love the woman screaming to Richard Grenell, just because you suck cock doesn't mean you're not a bigot.
You don't ever see this type of thing happen at a Biden rally, and the reason for that is Biden actually supports the gay community.
That's the soundbite. The election's over, the polls have closed in Florida. That's the soundbite.
Warms my cold black heart. Next week, Queer Up Entertainment. Shonda Rhimes' new Netflix show teases same-sex love scene in the trailer. Watch this. If the trailer for Bridgerton, the first Netflix series from Grey's Anatomy showrunner Shonda Rhimes, is any indication, then Regency England was quite the place for gossips and queer folks. Starring Jonathan Bailey and featuring the voice of Dame Julie Andrews, the 8-episode series follows the siblings of the wealthy Bridgerton family as they navigate the competitive elite social scene of the early 19th century, a world turned upside down by the scandalous writings of a mysterious Lady Whistledown, voiced by Andrews, who seems to know and reveal everyone's dirty little secrets. Yes, it's Gossip Girl meets Downton Abbey. The trailer reveals at least a few steamy same-sex love scenes with Bailey. The project is out December 25th.
I personally am really excited for this because I'm a huge Anglophile. I love anything about English history, and I'm really hoping that the show is somewhat historically accurate. It probably won't be, but it's nice to see that we're going to see some gay representation in this time period in England, and I'm hoping that they'll show some of the many bawdy houses and gay culture that existed at the time, which is not often talked about.
Is Shonda Rhimes trying to be Ryan Murphy? Because this looks amazing. First off, all of the scandal in terms of if there is scandal, she's going to reveal it. There is definitely scandal. The static pictures of the male on male love affair is amazing. Make sure you go in and look at it. There was a brief glimpse of it in this video. And what is the LGBTQ not going to love? It looked like hundreds of drag queens gathering for a Halloween ball. We're going to love it. I'm pretty sure we're going to love it.
See, I didn't like either Gossip Girl or Downton Abbey. The only time I've really cared about Victorian gay guys was in Madonna's Vogue performance at the VMAs. And beyond that, I'm not really interested, but I'm sure it'll do well.
Next in Queer Up Gay Culture, get ready for the annual Tom of Finland Emerging Artist Competition. Tom of Finland is one of the history's most iconic artists for LGBTQ and masculine imaging. So much of the LGBTQ world was excited with the announcement of the Tom of Finland Emerging Artist Competition 2020. The worldwide competition has been a staple of masculine original art for 2 decades. Submissions are due no later than November 15th, and you can get complete rules and details at Queer News Tonight. And we wish you luck. In the meantime, enjoy some of these past winners.
It's amazing imaging. David Hopkins is actually one of the people that, are you drinking, sir?
I'm a Finland vodka.
Right, is one of the people that introduced me to a lot of Tom of Finland. I was aware of it, but not really closely. And the imaging is absolutely stunning. And this competition and these winners that you're looking at, also quite beautiful.
Tom of Finland was a very interesting person. The leather community is much broader than what he portrays, but he really brought the concept of being an androphile to the forefront, of being attracted to masculinity itself, even if it's not the gear or the situations.
I'm really hoping that because we're giving Tom of Finland more exposure, it might bring some people toward learning more about the history of the leather community as well as the gay community, and how masculine imaging has been a big part of our whole renaissance and dealing with what it means to be gay and a man in America. So I'm really hopeful that maybe this will be a good educational opportunity for a lot of people.
Next, we're going to queer up religion in reporting that the Vatican has now broken its silence, explains Pope Francis' civil union comments to the world. The Vatican says Pope Francis' comments on gay civil unions were taken out of context in a documentary that spliced together parts of an old interview, but still confirmed that Francis's belief that gay couples should enjoy legal protections. The Vatican Secretariat of State issued guidance to ambassadors to explain the uproar that Francis' comments created following the October 21st premiere of the film Francesco at the Rome Film Festival. The Vatican nuncio to Mexico, Archbishop Franco Coppola, posted the unsigned guidance on his Facebook page Sunday. In it, the Vatican confirmed that Francis was referring to his position in 2010 when he was Archbishop of Buenos Aires and strongly opposed moves to allow same-sex marriage. Instead, he favored extending legal protections to gay couples under what is understood in Argentina as a civil union law.
This actually makes me like Pope Francis even more. That means 10 years ago, he was still pushing for civil unions, which is way ahead of the rest of the Catholic Church. I'm not upset with it.
So I'd like to disagree with you here on that one. So I was raised in the Catholic Church. My entire family is Catholic as well. And I would love to read to you directly from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. If you want to look it up, this is Part 3, Life of Christ, Section 2, the 10 Commandments, Article 6, the 6th Commandment, Thou shalt not commit adultery. In this section of the Catechism, which if you don't know what the Catechism is, it's the official statement of belief by the Catholic Church. If you want to know what Catholics believe, look at this book. It's in here. Okay? Verse number 2357 says, basing itself on sacred scripture, which presents homosexual acts as a grave depravity, tradition has always declared that homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered. They are contrary to the natural law. They close the sexual act, the gift of life. They do not proceed from a genuine, effective, and sexual complementarity. Under no circumstances can they be approved. In section 2358, they said, this inclination, which is objectively disordered, constitutes for most of them a trial. I will say, it does go on to say that we shouldn't discriminate against gay people, but it does say that we have a condition. In section 2359, it says that homosexual persons are called to chastity, and basically that homosexuality is a condition that we need to come to Christ. So I don't believe any of this. I don't care. The Pope can say all of that until they change that and stop teaching hate in the church and allow people to get married and allow gay priests to participate in the church, i.e. every gay person is allowed to participate in the church the same as everyone else. This is nothing but a move by the Pope to preserve the church because he's being pressured to modernize, and he doesn't want the church to split. If he wanted to do the right thing, he would advocate for marriage equality.
There's this old adage in every political system in the world throughout history, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And the Pope likely, in terms of his comments in 2010, was part of the 3 steps forward and perhaps 3 steps back. The documentary is welcomed, the clarification is welcomed, because the Pope is putting on the table the ability for the entire church to discuss it. Every single thing that has been said here in our comments of the story, I agree with. However, it is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. History evolves.
Yep. Next week, we're up gay culture. Study finds gay Republicans are self-loathing. Are you listening, log cabin Republicans and gays for Trump? Get ready for the shocker of the century. Gay Republicans in 2020 have a few issues to sort through. A new Williams Institute study found that the right-wing gays are more likely to wish they were straight, perhaps because they chose to support a system that actively seeks to oppress them. Just a thought. The UCLA-based institute combed through data from the Generations study, which sampled LGB folks and found that Republicans are more than twice as likely as Democrats to wish deep down they were, quote, completely heterosexual. And they're just as likely to interpret their sexual orientation as a personal shortcoming. Quote, there's a common belief that LGBT identity and Republican affiliation are incompatible. Ilian H. Mayer, Distinguished Senior Scholar of Public Policy at the Williams Institute and lead author of the survey, said via statement, among the study's participants, researchers say 41% of LGBT Republicans wish they could be straight, while only 17% of LGBT Democrats felt similarly. 38% of GOP LGB also said they see their sexuality as a character flaw, with 16% of LGBT Democrats saying the same. This study needs to be placed in front of log cabin Republicans, #Walkaway founder Brandon Strauch, and especially Richard Grenell. It's all time for you to come out of the real closet you're in.
I'm so glad that this came right after the Catholic Church one, because I feel the same way about the Republican Party as I do the Catholic Church. You should walk away, because they don't support you, and there's other institutions that do, including the one I'm sitting in right now.
Mm-hmm. Sunshine Cathedral, excellent point, is the largest queer-affirming church in the world. Their broadcast, I encourage you to tune in Sundays at 10:30. It's live. It is the real religion, and the support of that broadcast comes from the real LGBTQ community.
Yeah, I've seen some of the self-hatred from LGBTQ Republicans right on our own products. We've had 2 different hosts from It's Happening Out that showed it in different ways, and yeah, it's sad when, especially one of them who's barely literate, feels pressure to be that way.
I'm having some flashbacks.
There's no flying microphone.
Flashbacks. Well, that's the end of the headlines for today. Next, let's catch up on all of the news surrounding COVID-19 with our quarantine quickies. There's a lot to discuss during this pandemic, so let's get it right underway.
First, in quarantine quickies, Birx contradicts Trump in election eve memo urging coronavirus action. White House Coronavirus Task Force Coordinator Deborah Birx said in a memo Monday, first obtained by the Washington Post, that the U.S. is, quote, entering the most concerning and most deadly phase of this pandemic, unquote. Why it matters? In the memo, on the eve of the election, Birx contradicts President Trump's repeated claims that the U.S. is, quote, rounding the corner in the virus fight, as she calls for, quote, much more aggressive action on the COVID-19 response. Her comments come after NIAID Director Anthony Fauci told the Washington Post in an interview Friday that the U.S. was, quote, in for a whole lot of hurt, unquote, going into the fall and winter, prompting Trump to suggest he may seek to fire the career civil servant. The Birx letter may put her position with the White House in jeopardy.
You know, it's interesting to me, the most admired person in the COVID response, which has been the worst health crisis in a century, is the person that he threatens to fire. And the most important actual policy advisor for the White House says and contradicts completely the president, indicating the worst is yet to come and we must do something about it. And it likely, if he wins the election, is going to place her in a position where he replaces her also.
Yeah, and I have to say, the president is completely right. We are rounding a corner. We're turning the wrong way against one-way traffic. I don't know what reality people are living in. Even if you personally don't feel it's a dangerous disease, to see the infection rates and to see the older people who are dying, if you don't care about that, then you're not a person. I don't care.
And I also have to call attention. You can see the number on the screen with us. In the LGBTQ community, 85,000 deaths.
I'm glad that you pointed out how qualified Dr. Fauci is, because he is the most qualified doctor in the country, pretty much. He's worked on the AIDS crisis as well as swine flu. He's not really replaceable, so I think that we should just tell Trump that he fired him, and then we'll explain all the rest of the coronavirus news the same way we explain everything to him, which is some Henson-style Muppets that can just talk to him. It's okay. Everything's going to be okay.
And speaking of one of Dr. Fauci's contemporaries, tonight is part 30 of Q's Q&A on coronavirus in the LGBTQ community, November 3rd. This special segment is designed to be unique in America to answer your questions about coronavirus for the LGBTQ community during this pandemic.
Every Tuesday, we have an American pioneer on AIDS HIV medical treatment. With us is Dr. Howard Grossman, specialist in internal medicine with an emphasis on HIV. He was the executive director of the American Academy of HIV Medicine. He has become nationally recognized as an educator on HIV issues and as an advocate for LGBTQ civil rights and the rights of our community.
And he's also become the medical expert during pandemic for Queer News Tonight. Welcome, Dr. Grossman. And before we get into the viewer questions, I want to follow up to the conversation and the reporting that we did last week about the antibody studies. You were one of the first people, in fact, you were the first person that I knew that contracted COVID-19, and your discussion about antibodies and the possibilities of immunity. And then now some of the study, or a study, has suggested that it may not protect you. I want to, before we get into the viewer questions, ask you about that issue on antibodies.
Well, it's great to see you again, Al, and I'm glad we fixed our technical problems.
Right.
I was really missing you very badly.
Thank you.
Here you proposed marriage to me, and then you disappeared.
They're doing it now.
So I think we've talked about this before, but it's very important to understand that the current test available commercially is testing for the wrong antibody. So the current commercial test was developed because it was the easiest test to develop, and it tests for what's called the nucleocapsid, so the protein at the center of the virus. This is not a neutralizing antibody because the antibody can't get into the middle of the virus. Okay, so we're testing for something that only shows that you've had an immune response to the virus, but doesn't really tell us anything about immunity. So the fact that it disappears at 3 months is really not that important. So the British study that you quoted last week sent out the commercially available tests to several thousand people, and in those people that antibody disappeared. This past week, we had a study published in Science magazine from Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, and they looked at, I think it was 37,000 people who had developed COVID over the last 8 or 9 months, some of them with just mild cases and some with severe cases. And in something like 99% of those people, they still had what are actually neutralizing antibodies. So antibodies to the receptor binding protein on the spike of the virus. You have those pictures of COVID behind you, and all those little things that look like golf tees are what they call the spike. There's an antibody to that is in fact a neutralizing antibody. And those appear to still be there 5 months after infection. So that's very reassuring.
Okay, great. That helps in terms of our understanding of that study and our reporting last week. Let's jump into the questions that we have this week. And we're going to start with Gordon.
First question from a viewer. The president promised, quote, a big surprise on vaccine by election day. What is happening and what is next?
Well, big surprise, it's election day and no vaccine.
Yeah.
But I think, actually, you've been talking about vaccines for so long, and I kept saying, I think, on this program, that it was striking me as very strange that they were talking about pushing out vaccines with less than 3 months of data. Well, it turns out from an interview with Dr. Fauci from about 2 weeks ago that the vaccine that they're talking about is actually not a preventative vaccine. It is a therapeutic vaccine that's going to be used to treat people already infected with the virus to hopefully shorten the course of the virus. Well, certainly you can figure out pretty quickly if that works in a few months. But that's not the preventive vaccine that everybody expects they're actually talking about. So now it makes sense.
It's certainly more profitable.
Yeah, well,
Interesting.
Right, but it's a treatment vaccine, not a preventive vaccine. So that, I think that is something the media has not picked up on at all.
Howard, just hedge your bets. We understand it's a crystal ball. But just in 20 seconds, give us a projection of what you see as the possibility of a preventative vaccine. What kind of timeline?
Well, I mean, you tell me, Al. I would like to see a vaccine that has a year of protective data and a year of safety data. Okay, do we want a vaccine that has 3 or 4 months worth of protection? That doesn't seem to make much sense.
Yeah.
So, put that timeline into perspective, and then also having to recruit large numbers of people.
See, when we make the connection, I'm asked this 25 times a week. When are we going to be able to get back to some normalcy? You've got to connect the dots in terms of what we're talking about here. Masks, social isolation, hand washing, preventative measures are the only thing in the short and medium run. You have said this 100 times.
In the long run.
And in the long run, yeah.
I mean, we're talking, if you listen to the experts, they're saying 2022. Okay, so this stuff is with us, and we need to learn to live our lives with it. Look, my office is open. We've been open since June. We wear masks. My patients wear masks. We wash our hands a lot, but we've managed to have an open office. Now, can we go back to the same restaurant business we used to? Can we go back to the theater? I think those are much more problematic things.
Yeah.
yeah, I imagine it's probably going to be like 3 years before everything gets back to full normal. But we do have a second viewer question. What should we be paying attention to on the Fire Fauci movement as it relates to my health?
Well, remember, Dr. Fauci, I mean, not only being the most respected scientist in the world, he's also the most quoted and probably has the most published articles of any scientist. He's also a civil servant. Now, Donald Trump had some garbage presidential edict about the civil service and being able to fire people, but that is a violation of everything our civil service has stood for. So in order to fire Fauci, he would actually have to have the Secretary of Health and Human Services or the director of the NIH do it. And I'm not sure either one of them has the balls to do it. Plus, there would be a lengthy appeal process because the civil service has those protections in place. So I don't think Dr. Fauci's afraid, and I don't think we should be afraid. And hopefully, by the time all that works out, if he tries to do it, we'll have a new president.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's reassuring what you have just said in the soundbite on the lengthy process. And Gordon, we have another viewer question.
The third viewer question is, I have never felt so anxious and am becoming scared about what's next. What should I be doing?
Yeah, I'd like to say bourbon, but I know that wouldn't be a really good answer medically. Listen, this is the most anxious time, I think, whatever side of the aisle you're on, whatever your political beliefs, this is a time of anxiety for everybody. I think if it's really bad and it's interfering with things, you really should talk to your primary care provider about it, talk to a therapist about it. It may be that you need medication. Certainly, I know lots of people who are doing yoga all of a sudden, practicing meditation techniques. But I think realize that everybody around you is under, there you go. Vodka. Everybody around you is under tremendous pressure and feeling this anxiety. And I think the biggest thing we can do is be kind to each other. I think it's time to ratchet down our rhetoric on both sides and try to speak to each other with some sort of respect.
Howard, let me ask you to, again, your crystal ball. It's a crystal ball. I say that, and I've said it many times. This is the 30th implementation of you and I in Q's Q&A on COVID and LGBTQ healthcare issues. Are we going to be sitting here talking in January in version 44 of Q&A on Tuesday night, where we're going to be discussing significant suicide percentages having increased? Are we going to see significant?
Well, we're clearly seeing more drug abuse, and I think we're seeing a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety. There's an awful lot of guns out there, and guns are one of the chief ways that people commit suicide. So I would be afraid of that. I think we're going to be talking in early 2021, even if Trump loses, about huge numbers of deaths that will be happening. I think our governor in Florida is never going to shut down Florida again, unfortunately. And each of us is going to have to decide how much we want to shut down. If you look at Europe right now, England shut down this week, today. Austria shut down at midnight last night. France has shut down. And these are places that have far less infections than us. So I think January is going to be a tough time for us.
Yeah.
And hopefully people will listen here, get some good advice, and we're all going to have to figure out how to protect ourselves.
LGBTQ America, we remind you with that grim assessment, accurate but grim assessment, your best defense is the same thing that we said on part 4, which is social isolation and correct distancing. You can live your lives. You can do, as Dr. Grossman has done, of learning how to operate even his medical clinic in COVID-19, and you cannot make mask a political issue going forward. If somebody else does, don't participate in it.
And Al, let's not talk about social isolation, because that's the problem. We have to find ways to be with one another, whether it's outside or in some safe way or in limited numbers, but we do have to find a way to be with people. And on masks, let me just emphasize something that came up again this week. Your mask needs to fit tightly over your nose, and it needs to fit over here. Okay? If your mask is not doing that, you need a different mask. If your cloth mask doesn't have something to press to make it tight, then use a pipe cleaner or a piece of metal wire that you glue to the mask so you can make a tight fit.
All right. Well, that's it. And before we close out, Howard, I don't recall because of our technical problems last week. Did you accept my marriage proposal, or did I accept your marriage? I don't quite remember which
lost ether.
Lost ether, exactly. All right, America, that is part 30 of Q's Q&A of coronavirus and the LGBTQ community. We're going to be here every Tuesday night, it sounds like for a long time, as we bring our viewer questions and the most important medical advice from our medical expert, Dr. Howard Grossman from Midway Specialty Care Center right here in Wilton Manors, Florida. As always, thank you, Dr. Grossman.
Thank you, Al.
And thanks for being with us tonight. We'd also like to remind you next that Happening Out Television Network is broadcasting on our permanent set in partnership with Sunshine Cathedral, the world's largest queer church here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We always joke, and all you have to do is look to the left of me and to the right of me. We're broadcasting from the gayest place on planet Earth. Our support of their Sunday celebration is the largest LGBTQ religious broadcast in the world, every Sunday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, and it's live. We encourage you to tune in, and Sunshine Cathedral is my queer church. Watch this.
This is Damian Pardo, and I'm the chair of Forward Miami, and Sunshine Cathedral is my queer church.
Well, we'd also like to thank our set designer, Concepto Modern Living here in Fort Lauderdale, for making this set in this amazing queer church campus possible. Well, now we end tonight's broadcast with the big finish. These are short story mentions of LGBTQ news or news with a gay perspective. So here we go, first on Queer News Tonight's The Big Finish. You stressed, so take a break and look at this tiny chipmunk restaurant.
Now I both want pie, and I have the song I'm Just a Squirrel Trying to Get a Nut, so move your butt on the dance floor, but that's too old for Gordon.
It's so cute. I don't know what to say other than that. It's nice to see some wholesome content every once in a while.
He's got full bar.
This, it does. This was set up. There's many great pictures on this. You should go on the internet. This is real, by the way, and they set it up just to have some smiles and provide something for the chipmunks, which apparently were being forgotten in our COVID-19 response. In the big finish, let's consider our suggestions when Dr. Fauci is fired. Who's going to replace him?
Well, if you've been watching the late night shows, several people have suggested things. My favorite, of course, being zombie Pavarotti, because it's fake news that he's dead, and who else to leave a pandemic other than a zombie?
Yes.
I think that maybe Draws, aka Dr. Oz, is a good filler for that. I mean, he's not as qualified nearly, and he's promoted some things that are medically not very scientifically supported, but at least he could explain to the American people how it all works.
If Trump wins or loses and he fires Fauci, I think if it leaves Trump in place, whether it's 3 months or the next 4 years, he should, in that same zombie theme that David talks about, he should bring back zombie Dr. Kevorkian, because it's the only combination that would supplement the death killer, the walking death that is leading the White House.
If he gets reelected, I will get in line with that doctor.
Dr. Kevorkian, zombie Dr. Kevorkian. In the big finish, Saturday Night Live signed off before the election, their last broadcast, by flipping off the middle finger, and a dash of hope for all of us.
I have nothing else to say.
I can't wait to see the next 4 years of what SNL is going to bring us, no matter who wins this election, because I'm either going to get more of the Trump impersonations that are hilarious, or I'm going to get to see Biden impersonations that are hilarious. And I hope that I get to see a whole lot more of Kate McKinnon.
I read an article. I first thought that they had slipped this through. I read an article just today that Lorne Michaels personally said it was okay for them to do that. That's brilliant. Awesome. It gives us a dash of hope.
Oh, I love it when SNL breaks rules. But that's it for today's news for the LGBTQ community on the world's first daily LGBTQ evening news show.
Remember, if it's important to the LGBTQ community, it's important to Queer News Tonight. But you must help us. Click subscribe on YouTube, ring the bell for updates, and share this news.
We are literally out of the closet and into the headlines, and this is the only source of live LGBTQ news in the world. Your community needs your support.
You are not alone. We will get through this crisis.
We are here with you, and this is Queer News Tonight.
Well, thank you for joining us, and I'm Al Ferguson, and on behalf of David Hopkins and Gordon Woodworth III, we are going to see you daily and tomorrow night, the first day after the election. Hold tight, 7 p.m. Good night, America.
I wonder if Zombie Luciano